Hey, welcome to Revolutionizing Business Operations with Tony Saldanha. Joining me is Ajit Kumar Kunji from Salesforce, who brings deep expertise in enterprise technology and business transformation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for the opportunity and thanks for organizing this.
Now, Ajit is Vice President and Head of Global Business Services at Salesforce. He's one of my go-to people whenever I have questions about the use of technology for process transformation. And to be honest, more recently, his work on Agentic AI has been a big influence. Now, prior to Salesforce, Ajit was Senior Director of Enterprise Business Services at Walmart, and he has over 20 years of leadership experience before that with the world's biggest BPOs. Now, Ajit, I'm going to start with something personal. Now, when you took on your very first job, did you think you would end up in this great position in your career?
I never thought about that, at least at that point of time. I had an interesting journey. After finishing my MBA, I actually started with pharmaceutical because of a chemistry background. Soon enough, I understood that selling to doctors was not my cup of tea. And then I shifted to shared services, which was early days in India with GE Checkers. So I started and joined them. And I was fortunate enough during the course of the journey to actually have been blessed with tremendous leaders who have showed the path to me in terms of what it takes to run GBS, what it takes to be part of shared services. And that's how it went about.
You know, what's interesting, Ajit, is for many folks who have been in the GBS industry for a few decades now, GBS really wasn't a career option per se in those days. It didn't exist the way it does now. Even BPO, business process outsourcing, was in its infancy, and these big opportunities were hard to imagine. But folks like you've done a really good job of latching on to the transformational leadership that's possible in GBS. And that's really what I'm fascinated by what you have done. I'm going to directly jump in, Ajit, into the big topic here, Agentic AI. Now, you and I know that there is a lot of hype and there's a lot of marketing and there's a lot of misinformation in there. But the fact of the matter is that Agentic AI is truly disruptive. Unlike traditional RPA or AI, which is all about automating existing processes, Agentic is about totally reimagining your work process and connecting not just at a task level, but at an enterprise end-to-end level and a cross-company ecosystem level. It's truly transformative. Tell us a little more about your own realization and journey in the power of Agentic.
That's an interesting question, Tony. See, I joined Salesforce back in 2023. And as part of our initial induction, I was spending a lot of time trying to understand the trailblazers and Salesforce application landscape. Back in August 2023, something struck my mind as we were looking at the CRM software capabilities and its ability to do custom objects. When I looked at Mulesoft, right? Someone who has come from the process world, for me, it was an aha moment. You are able to bring data from multiple applications using Mulesoft into one custom object. And you're able to use the custom object to validate, define thresholds, and do a lot of magic. So that was an aha moment for me. And that's when I discussed this with some of my team members and said, okay, why don't we start with a bunch of POCs. We did about 8 different POCs as start of this. And Agentic AI was not in place at that time. It was more about a generative AI concept which was on. So we started POCs with some of the basic components. See, being in GBS.
And Ajit, sorry, just to jump in. And how many years ago was this?
This is, I would say, August 2023.
Yes. And the reason I was asking is because Agentic is quite literally like a year old. And so a lot of what you've done and your approach, that was only a couple of years ago, but that's the nature of cutting edge technology. But I'm sorry, yes, please keep going. Yes.
Yeah, so we started with about 8 different POCs. The objective was very simple, right? One, can I bring real-time data together at one place, right? So that's foundational. If you don't have the data, you cannot run automation and transformations. That's number one. Number two, how do I eliminate all of this swivel chair motion, which is people using Excels, macros, and all of these things, right? So can I bring the complex computation into an application? So we use Mulesoft to do that actually. And then can I use the generative AI component? So something called a prediction builder on the Einstein side of it. And then the last thing was the omnichannel capabilities, because for us to reorchestrate a process, your workflow needs to be very strong. So
Yeah.
there are about 8 different POCs we did, and we were successful in all 8 of them. And we brought 2 of those use cases in our Dreamforce last year and showcased how we are using complex calculations as well as how we are using agentic, not agentic AI, sorry, the LLM to
Yes.
actually drive decision making.
Yeah.
So that's how we started the journey. Now, interesting enough, that journey took a bit of a twist with agentic AI coming into play. And one
Yeah.
of the things we noticed with Einstein was there was a bit of an hallucination which we were seeing. About 7 to 8% of the responses were a bit hallucinated.
Okay.
And fast forward to September of 2024, with Agentforce coming in and being part of the Salesforce, we did have access to the Agentic AI version,
Yeah.
which was actually powered by what we call as Atlas Reasoning Engine. And we saw when we shifted to Agentic AI, our hallucinations completely went off. Our accuracy levels were closer to 100%.
Now, that is amazing because one of the biggest fears most people have about AI and about LLMs in particular is, of course, hallucination. Now, you're making a really good point that if you apply and design agents correctly, you can make each of their tasks so specific that you can actually pretty much eliminate hallucination. And so this is really a key message. Now, was there something that you did in particular as you designed the agentic architecture to address this? Or is this pretty much a feature of Agentforce and what you guys do?
See, there are a couple of things which was a big positive coming in here. Number one, I don't have to go through a complex process of prompt reengineering with the agentic AI interface on Agentforce. So what it means is I can define the topics, I can define the guardrails of what it needs to avoid, and then I can expose the data. So the beauty of that is it has about 15, 16 different LLMs, and don't quote me on that particular number because it
Sure.
might have changed by now on that,
Oh, I'm sure it has, yes.
which
But a
is
lot of them.
yeah, so what it does is it synthesizes the query and it also refines the responses. While there are some of those SLMs and LLMs, make sure that there is no bias in the responses coming in. It is restricting confidential data. So it was an amalgamation of pretty much all the things which we needed to make it safe and
Mhm.
more accurate, which then took off because once we were successful with our first agentic AI, we then kicked off a series of initiative on that. So today I'm sitting on about 5 agents already deployed. I have about 25 projects and pipelines. Phenomenal. It's a phenomenal shift over the last 1 year.
That is amazing. And for our listeners, I have to say this. As I mentioned, Agentic is relatively new, and you wouldn't really appreciate that if you went to any kind of a industry forum because everybody claims that they are doing Agentic. But there are two differences. One is, are they doing true Agentic, which is orchestration, or are they basically doing automation? But the second is that there are very few proven use cases. So there's a lot of conversations about you could do this and you could do that. But Ajit, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because this is not a question of Ajit could do this. You have already done 5 use cases. And so what I'm going to do now is to have you talk about those use cases. Let's pick one or two. Which is the one that you're most proud of?
Yeah, let me take a little bit of a step back. And then this is more from a listener standpoint, right? So, how we are using agentic AI from a shared services standpoint, I would break that down into 3 parts. Number one is agentic AI engagement layer. What it does is it is taking care of deflection. Now, why do I say deflection? Is because typically you would know that any GPS services, whether it's requests, calls, or any of those things coming in, one of your biggest challenges as a team, you're getting incorrect requests, incomplete requests, and so on. And you also have a challenge with respect to saying you're getting requests from multiple different languages. You need to stop that, which is where the agentic AI engagement layer comes into play. This is something, Tony, if you remember, I showcased out in SSO and
Yes, I remember your demo.
so what we're doing there is a request. There are three agents who are working here in sync on it, where the request comes in, and if there's a translation required, it does the translation in real time from any language to English. So that's number one. Number two is there is an intent agent, which is looking at saying that what is the intent of the query, right? Are you seeing a frustration in the language itself, right? Sometimes there is a frustration in the language. I want to make sure I escalate that faster out there. Plus, is it for my department? It could be a different query for a different team and so on. So I use omnichannel to then route it to the right teams. And the third one is validation of data. So when your data sets are coming in, you want to make sure that you have all the required input. If your input is incorrect, you actually end up doing a lot of rework back and forth.
Yes,
right? So
yes.
you're talking about how do I reduce the cycle time? How do I improve the experience of your customers and solve it faster? So that's the number one, what we call as AI engagement layer.
Okay.
It's deployed. We have deployed that in what we call the territory operations out there. There is about 34% of the use cases which we see having gone through this filter first of all going in there. The second thing on agentic AI is agentic recommendation engine, which is about using the data to come out with a recommendation which is going to actually help your associates solve the query faster. And the third, I would say, agentic decision making. There isn't too much of a segregation out there. It is more about how you want to sequence it, because I strongly believe that given the criticality of the work GBS does, we need a longer hypercare. So I typically stay with the recommendation human in a loop environment. So that's an important part there. And we showcased two extremely good use cases on both of these earlier, about a week back during the Salesforce. One was what we call as quote special terms, where we are talking about internal order to cash flow, where there's a request of pricing request and a quote which is coming in. And you see typically all your account executives make some edits as part of the negotiation discussion with it. Some of those are not standard terms. If it is standard term, go through. But the moment you add additional context and the language to it, associates have to actually go back, review that in detail, look at historical references to say, can I approve, can I not approve, and so on, right?
Okay.
Accordingly, it goes, escalates legal, and so on. So what we did was we brought in Data Cloud to actually look at historical information. We created an agent with strong guardrails and approval reasons out there. So there are a series of 10 different identification mechanism to say whether this is available, this can be approved and not, and so on.
Okay.
And then Data Cloud actually brings all the historical data, gives you your top 5 matches and saying 99% accuracy, this was the decision made last time on something similar.
Okay.
A process which typically takes you 12 to 15 minutes now can be done in 3 to 4 minutes because you have the data right in front of you and it's surfaced for you. So this is real.
Okay.
This is absolute real. And then the third one is one of my favorites, because having worked in accounts payable and other areas with Walmart and others, we are talking about 120 million invoices and so on.
Okay.
Of course, the number of invoices in Salesforce is much lower because it's a different environment altogether.
But different industry.
But here we were talking about people enabled to use Agentforce as part of the flow of work. So biggest challenge for us was we used one of the popular accounts payable application from an industry standpoint. Of course, there are multiple channels of invoices coming into you. One of the channel is by email. And with email, you have different formats from different suppliers, and which is standard from industry. So this particular tool has the ability to extract the information, a typical standard OCR format and so on it. We realized 100% of those extracts had to be validated because the field level accuracy cannot be ascertained. And sometimes one field is right and one field is wrong and so on. So given that unknown, 100% had to be validated. And now what we are doing is instead of human validating that, we are doing what we call as two different mechanisms. And I'll elaborate on the second one because that's another interesting development, very recent. First one, what we call is IDP. It's Intelligent Document Processing. It's a tool
Okay.
which is part of Mulesoft Kitty. Out of the box, we tested out about 3 to 4,000 different invoice applications on it, which is coming out at about 96.5% accuracy out of the box. And it gives you for each extraction field, what's the accuracy level saying, is it a 99%, 95%, and so on. So it's
Okay.
something like an AWS ICR engine. And on top of it, you have Einstein, which is an intelligence layer sitting on top of it.
Yeah.
Regional biases which exist, for example, you call tax names of different and so on.
Different terminology.
It is able to take that in and convert it into what you exactly want from a system standpoint. So that was how we started this whole project with IDP. But then recent development on multimodality on Agentforce, we had a second layer coming in on validation. So now I have the original accounts payable application, which is there, or procurement application, which exists, it's extracting it. IDP is extracting it, and Agentforce multimodality is extracting it. So instead of humans validating it, it's 3-layer validation which goes in. And on top of it, agent will tell you field level. Is it a match? Not a match. Match, not a match. The moment it's a match, it's going to make a decision. And it's going to put it on a custom object saying that it is approved. Right?
Got
Or
it.
it requires a human intervention, depending on the status of approval. So that's one we did. And then on top of that, for an AP to be touchless, I think one of the other big factors is PO matching. So either you have a 2-way match or a 3-way match. From an AP standpoint, we roughly do a 2-way match on it. So we are using Snowflake and Data Cloud to bring the PO numbers in, and it is doing matching based on not just the PO, the category information, the description on it, and all of those things. So the whole landscape looks beautiful now because zero validation, PO matching automatically, everything is fine. Boom, it's out into the next step, whether it is tax coding and so on.
Now, one of the last times we spoke, you were telling me how close you were to actual touchless payables. Share, if you wouldn't mind, with our listeners, how close you are to that.
We should see that deployed in production in about another 3 weeks' time. We're just waiting on a last element in terms of how many API hits we are allowed, but otherwise we have complete enterprise architectural approval. Everything is in place.
That's transformational. That's not just automation for touchless, because that's re-engineering, because now what you're talking about is everything from validating the data to essentially figuring out or recommendations to now having multi-layer judgments on whether something is accurate or not, to actually making a final decision. And then you have enough confidence to say, I've gone beyond the human in the loop. I may actually, depending on the judgment of the agent itself, be able to auto-approve.
Yeah. See, for the first 6 months, and just being cautious with respect to all of the developments, given the financial nature and so on of it, we would run a hypercare with 100% going into human in a loop.
Sure.
So that the data is surfaced and you're able to, on the back end, track the quality and the output of it. But in reality, yeah, the short answer is, can we turn it to 100% auto? Yes, we can.
Yes. And again, this is the same challenge people have with having been let down by the automobile industry on driverless cars and stuff like that, which is the hype was set up and the reality is now not really. But I think the difference here that we're talking about is it doesn't have to be 1 or a 0. It doesn't have to be no human or all human, because now you've got the capability, depending on the materiality of the decision, for the agent to essentially say, I'm 100% confident, and this is not like the biggest deal that we're going to make. And so you let some transactions through after having done all the hypercare and stuff like that. And then other transactions, you may always have some human intervention. And so I think this is really the reimagination that excites me about the use of agentic. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So one of the biggest challenges that most organizations have around agentic is the standardization of data. And you talked earlier about Mulesoft and other technologies that don't necessarily assume that you have a standard platform. So I'm going to take you out of your Salesforce role into an industry expert. What's that right balance between I need to have a certain amount of automation in the platforms, the transactional platforms, versus I might actually use other data extractor and harmonization tools so you can do some AI work in parallel?
I think that's a great question. I think that was one thing which I was pondering a lot about. What are the deterrents for bringing in agentic AI? The application landscape across every organization is different. See, one of the things which we did was we avoided large-scale change management. Okay, I have broken this down into what's controllable and what's not controllable. And that's an important aspect as you are looking at scaling up. How do you avoid large organizational change?
That's correct. Yeah,
Right.
because then you lose, because of the amount of change to the users,
Correct.
you lose them. Yeah.
So my philosophy has been fairly simple, is that you bring the data in whatever format.
Yeah.
On the back end, I'm going to converge it. Right? If you keep that philosophy on, I think you should be able to solve this problem of multiple application landscape and data quality elements and so on.
Yeah.
So that's a big differential in philosophy out there. Now, what it also does is I'm enabling GBS for future from that angle. So today we talk about multi-agent orchestration and so on.
Yeah.
From that standpoint. For a multi-agent orchestration to happen, you will have a front-end agent which is interacting with the back-end agent. Now, if you're creating what we call as ambient agents on the back end of it, which is executing the task, which is system to agent interaction, it's not
Mhm.
people conversing in
Mhm.
on
Mhm.
that. The moment you unlock the back end part of it, and once the front end agents are ready, it's just a plug and play.
Yes, you can just switch. Yeah, you can switch from
Now,
systems or agents to other agents. Yes. Yeah. But I think the paradigm shift that you're helping the industry change here is that this doesn't have to be sequential, which is I'm going to spend the next 3 years getting from multiple systems of record into one platform, and then I'm going to do the warehouse, and then so on and so forth.
yeah.
That has been broken. And then, of course, through some of these capabilities that you're talking about, both to extract and then chunk the data and warehouse it and things like that, you have to ask yourself, for the use case, do I have good enough information to pick it up and build the use case?
Yeah.
So that's absolutely brilliant. Switching gears once again, I want to get into this misunderstanding of agentic AI versus LLMs and generic AI. Help us demystify this. How is agentic significantly different from the rest of AI and automation like RPA and other stuff?
It's significantly different. So when you talk about RPA, and you have both front end or high-centric RPAs and the back end one. Number one, it doesn't have any ability for generative content from that standpoint. So what it is pretty much a very basic rule-based automation is what you're right at a generic level, right? Layman language level out there, right? Now, if you look at LLM, and keep in mind, I'm not a technologist, more a business person, right? So my choice of words will be more layman language.
That's what we look for here.
From an LLM standpoint, I see a lot of generative stuff coming in, and it is using the backend inference of the training data and giving you a generated stuff coming out there. What's missing is the action component. And the biggest differential between agentic AI is it is not only generative, but it can also execute the actions within the guardrails of what you ask it to do. So that's the big differential. So I would say we are at a phase which is right below AGI, where you are able to execute the actions, but it still doesn't have the general intelligence yet from that angle.
That's absolutely well put. One of the ways in which I've talked about this, and I would like to get your opinion on this, is to basically say, hey, look, you have to forget about the technology. You have to think about the use cases. Are you automating tasks? Are you driving end-to-end, not just automation, but efficiency in an end-to-end process inside the company? Or are you actually optimizing the entire ecosystem? So inside your company and even outside with suppliers, customers, banks, so on and so forth. Now, within those use cases, the reality is that you're probably going to use some component of just pure automation, right? So maybe transaction processing and some automation, RPA is fine. And then within that, you're also going to be using some amount of generative AI, right? To actually perhaps generate either inferences or documents or things like that. But then the magic of agentic AI is that you can essentially define a goal, like you said, and then think of the agent as having enough autonomy to orchestrate between humans and other agents to get the job done. And that's a very different way of thinking about agentic than the traditional way, which is you have to map every activity and action and decision in the node, and then you hard code that, so to speak, with RPA. Here you're talking about set a goal and then design an orchestrating agent with enough autonomy to essentially get the job done. That's mind-blowing for me.
Absolutely spot on. I'll give you a very recent experience of mine. I was in Dreamforce last week and we were having a team get together. So I call up this restaurant. It's a nice Burmese place out there in San Francisco. Because the number of people were greater than 8, you couldn't book it online. The call was picked up by an agent, digital agent, of course. And it asked me for all of the basic questions in terms of how many people, when the reservation is for, and so on. And then it quickly came back saying, do you want it outside? Do you want it inside? And book my reservation out there. Now, fast forward to the day when we actually were going for dinner, realized the team didn't have lunch, so we wanted to prepone it. So I call it up saying that I want to change the reservation. Okay, what do you want to do with it? Okay. I said, I want to change it ahead. It's able to know that today's date is so and so, and it moved the reservation. I didn't have to do anything. All the call was.
You didn't have to say it was for 3:30 p.m., 8 people, things like that. Yes.
Yeah. So fantastic experience coming out of that. So it is real. It's real. It's right around the corner for us. Yeah.
That's awesome. Leads me to my next question. So I'm going to put you in your role of an influencer for the GBS industry. As you think about the future of shared services, once you actually start to apply agentics, I'm not talking about now the hype and the misinformation that's there, but truly reimagining processes like your restaurant booking thing. Realistically, what should GBS leaders expect in terms of possibilities for disruption in the next 2 to 3 year horizon?
I think there is a significant change which is on the way. Right? Number one, I think a lot of GBS leaders would be able to see some of the business metrics changing significantly. What they could do in 48, 24 hours, they might be able to do it in less than an hour or instant and immediate. So they would see a change in the customer experience expectation and so on. So get ready for resetting those benchmarks from a GBS standpoint. So that's number one. Number two, I expect volumes to actually improve. What it means is your focus. So if you're in a contact center, your focus on AHTs are going to change a lot. You're not talking about, I want the calls to be closed early. They would be talking about, why don't you spend more time?
Yes.
And that is an opportunity for cross sell. That's an opportunity for engaging and getting to know the customer, right? So you're able to channelize your calls from solving problems to building relationship and cross-selling. So that's a shift which is going to come in from that standpoint. From a back office standpoint, I think the focus will shift from transactional solving to leakage avoidance to saying, how can I materially make a difference in terms of organizational benefit from that standpoint? So shifts like this, you would start seeing coming into play. I don't expect elimination of work comprehensively here. I think
I doubt that.
Things which we have kept aside.
There's no shortage of work.
Things we have kept aside saying that we don't have resources. We will be putting those resources in that state. Now, if you're an employee, I think what you got to think about is how do you embrace it?
Yeah.
How do you
How do you
make use
upskill?
of it? And then how do you become an expert in working with agentic AIs?
Yes. I think all of the three components that you talked about are cannot ignore type priorities in the back office for transactional stuff. How do you avoid value leakage? So how do you actually proactively reduce defects that happen, which essentially means you drive more efficiency, effectiveness in the transactional stuff. On the ability to actually grow revenue, not just deliver cost savings, GBS starts to become much more of an innovation engine and a revenue growth engine and a cash engine, not just a cost reduction engine. And so it's an opportunity to go up the value chain. And then, of course, the most important is what's in it for us, the GBS employees. And I think the point that you're making, Ajit, which is, look, this is a big change. And those of us that are able to comprehend it and understand it and start to use it are also going to be in a better position than those that think of this as a threat. So really good advice for GBS leaders. I'm going to switch gears once again, Ajit. Before I end, if you were to talk now to not senior GBS leaders, but people at the beginning of their GBS career, what advice would you give them?
I don't think it has changed significantly a lot, right? Of course, the agentic AI infiltration is big and its potentials are huge, but the fundamentals remains the same. You need to understand the domain you're in. That's an important aspect. Now, just don't get lost in transactions, right? I see if you're an AP person, it doesn't mean that you're an AP person alone, right? You've got to see how the overall finance domain comes into play. Number two, I think the need for techno-functional resources in future is going to be big. So basically, understand the end-to-end landscape on whatever you do. If you're in a GBS, understand GBS value chain. Be techno-functional. You don't need to be a coder, but every tool you use, what are its benefits? How can I bring and use it in my operations in my tool? That mindset of outside thinking is an important one. I think these are three which I would say is the most important. This is what I tell my kids is as well.
Thank you for sharing. And by the way, I think you and I think alike on this. I think this is no longer about, like you were saying, your narrow domain of AP. I think it's about understanding the entire end to end, and then the cross-functional blend of technology and work process, as the case may be, and the incredible opportunity that lies ahead. That's fantastic advice. Ajit, thank you very much. I have to say, this has been a fascinating conversation, both about how Agentic is set to transform global business services, but then some of the more pragmatic experiences that you shared with us. And for our listeners, the message is clear. Agentic AI isn't a distant future concept. It's available now. And early adopters are actually seeing significant benefits. And the question isn't whether to explore agentic AI, but how quickly you can start experimenting and learning. Ajit, thank you very much for sharing your insights and very practical experiences with us today. And to our listeners, of course, thank you for listening to Revolutionizing Business Operations with Tony Saldanha. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. And until next time, keep revolutionizing your operations. This is Tony Saldanha. Stay innovative.